Okay, let's start going. Let's get started on this workshop today. Have a sip of tea. And so the first thing I want to talk about, I have, so I've sort of installed here and I have open AC/DC Photo Studio Ultimate 2022. And as you can see, I've got a bunch of people in this folder because we're going to be talking about people mode. So people mode is a brand new mode in AC/DC 2022. It should be in all three products. And people mode is to basically enable a process of managing your facial recognition a bit better. In the past with AC/DC, this was kind of a slow process, and I'll give you an idea of what I mean. If I was to just navigate to my folder here and open an image up in view mode, one of the things you'll notice is that in view mode previously, which is where you'd have to interact with the naming function. So in order to name someone, you'd turn on face outlines and the face tool. So these two guys right here. And then it would give you the ability to move this little facial recognition box. So this is AC/DC searching for a face. And then once it has a face, it gives you the ability, like I said here, using the edit face outlines and names to add the names. And then so what you could do is you could add a person's name, and it would be added to essentially a directory in AC/DC called the Manage People tab, from where you could interact with by deleting or renaming someone, that sort of thing. But as soon as you actually name what would happen is AC/DC would, in this case, look for people's faces that looked similar to the person that you just named. And then what it'll do is it would make suggestions as you'd navigate through to other images. Sometimes, depending on the image sort of being in profile or there being a lighting difference like we have here, this is the same gentleman. His name is Vivek. What would happen is you'd have to go through individually through each. And in the third one, you could see that it picked that up based on the same lighting situation, in the sense that this one is both a black and white image, but now it recognizes him. But this is a fairly slow process because basically what you'd have to do is you'd have to manually input the name as you go through. And that poses a bit of a challenge if you want to name huge groups of people at the same time. So how face recognition works in AC/DC is like I said, you turn on this function, and then it basically scans every single image in your hard drive for what appears to be a face. And it does a fairly good job of this. And then as it does a job of this, you'd go through and you'd add the names. But let's sort of show people mode off, because people mode makes this very easy, and it takes away from this sort of step-by-step nature that you had to do in view mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to people mode. So people mode is this little people icon, believe it or not, up at the top right-hand corner here. And opening this brings you to people mode. Oh, you know what? I'm going to turn off this. Let's see, turn this guy off. There we go. Just want to hide the meeting controls so I don't see them constantly. But basically what this does is it brings up a little window here that contains all your named and unnamed people. You can also navigate to this menu similarly to how you navigate to the Manage People menu before. You can just go to Manage People and it'll actually bring up this whole new mode versus that little tiny little window that we had before in AC/DC 2021 and before. So this window is really, really helpful. So right now, as you can see, I already have a fairly large group of people that are already named in AC/DC. So these are people that I named in the past. And you can see that in essence, when I look at these different thumbnails, there's a couple different pieces of information. First and foremost, I see in this case this person's name, Vivek in this case, and we can see that there was in fact 3 images of him in total. Versus someone like Emily, for example, there is actually 7 images of her, and we can see that by this little number that's in the bottom right-hand corner. If I click on Emily, it brings me into this window that showcases all of the images that contain her. So all of these images that are currently flagged as Emily. And we can verify that these, in this case, 7 images are in fact Emily. One of the other neat things that we can do is we can actually show the context of these images by clicking on this little icon at the top right-hand corner, which shows the source image thumbnails, which of course will show us the full image that these faces are contained within. So in this case, this shows us the full image, and this just shows us the face, so we can quickly verify. You might want to go swap back and forth between these context and face thumbnails, depending on sort of what you're doing and how you're interacting with your subject. What you also might notice is that there's a section down at the bottom that's called suggested faces. And currently we don't have any suggestions, but for other people that we're going to be interacting with, there will be suggestions. And all this gives us an opportunity to do is basically say yes or no to a suggested image. So suggested in this case means that AC/DC is saying, hey, Adam, I think that this is Emily. Can you verify this? And there would be a green check mark to say yes, and then it'd be added to this window up top here. Or there's a red X that removes it from this window, and we have to go through a different method to naming that image. You might also notice that there's these 2 green and X marks just over on the right corner here. And what this is if in the case all of these images that were suggested, if there were multiples, were of Emily, we could just approve all of them at the same time. I'm going to go back and let's have a look at a suggested face. So in the case of Kennedy here, we have a little icon that's to the left of Kennedy, and that indicates that there's actually a suggestion. So it's a suggested face, and we need to verify that information. So let's go into Kennedy's image here. And you can see that there is an image here in this case, and it is a suggestion of Kennedy's face. So these 4 images are Kennedy, and we can either click the confirm all suggestions or the confirm suggestion just down to the bottom left-hand corner here. That indicates and that this is Kennedy, and she will be moved from this bottom suggested faces up to the top. So she's added to our listing. And when we go back, we can see that Kennedy has a listing of, or rather a 5 indicated right here. So that 1 that was added from the suggestion is added, and now it increases the total of Kennedy's images in our directory. I just noticed that Lana is a woman who has a face, but we actually have 0 images in our directory right now. And the reason for this is prior to this workshop, I wanted to go through the process of naming a group of people. So what I did is I actually went through and this is maybe good for you to know. I'll go back to manage mode, and I selected some images that contained Lana. So let me navigate down to Lana here. So these ones, for example. And what I did is I went to tools, face detection, and I actually removed the faces. So what this does is quite simple. If you go into view mode, it'll remove that little box that contains Lana's information. But what this doesn't do is it doesn't remove Lana from the actual people manager. That's why we have 0 located here. To remove Lana entirely from our people manager, what we'd want to do is we want to right click her, and we want to remove her as a person in our directory entirely. So that would give us the process of going through and remanaging her to begin with. So I can either rename her, I can merge her with somebody else. So in the case that I might have like Lana spelt with a lowercase l and Lana spelt with a uppercase L, maybe what I would want to do is I'd want to merge all the lowercase ones in with the uppercase ones. But I'm just going to remove her for now because we can actually go through the process of naming her again. But that gives you an idea of how to interact with these. By clicking on them, you're brought up into the actual window itself, and you can right click them to have a couple different actions that you interact with them. But these are just our named subjects. What about our unnamed subjects? So to go into our unnamed tab, we'd click right here. And as you can see, we have a listing of unnamed subjects. So we'd want to go through and name these people. And this process is quite simple. Once again, what you might notice is that there is a face thumbnails icon in addition to a image source. So it shows the context of those images. So you can gain an idea of which person you're looking at, which person you're interacting with by clicking on those icons. And then the other thing that we'll touch base in is the grouped and ungrouped function. But for now, let's start with the grouped function, because what the group function does is it takes a group of images that it's pretty sure are the same person. In the case that there's 9 of this gentleman and there's 5 of this gentleman right here. There's also 3 of this woman right here and 3 of her. So it goes through and it makes a group based on what it's fairly certain are the same person. The ungrouped function is going to do kind of the exact opposite of that. It's going to list just every image in your entire database that has a image box basically that has been detected over the image, and it's just going to list every single one. Iraj asked, how do we have a record of this webinar? Well, Iraj, we're going to be uploading it to YouTube by the end of the day. So I will make sure that it's on our YouTube channel for you to visit. Brock asked, I shoot team sports and inevitably get many faces in the crowd or on a sideline that I don't want to record. Are there any limits in the number of faces that we can show named? That's a good question. I don't think that there are any limits. Well, actually, there probably is. You'll have to, you know what? I'm sorry. Yeah. Can you contact me, Brock, via email? Because I'll have to ask the developers of what the final number is. I mean, the other thing to consider, right, is it's not going to notice a bunch of tiny faces. It'll probably only notice the ones that are the major focal points. But if you contact me via email, I actually touch base with our dev that created people mode and face detection in general. And I'll just ask them what the hard cap is. I kind of want to say that there's a hard cap of 5 or something like that in people mode. But that wouldn't make sense for family photos, in which case you might have multiple people. So, I mean, obviously the other thing too, which is you can actually go into one of these images, from your view mode, and you can manually take off all of those extra facial recognition boxes that you don't want. But that isn't really answering your question. So email me and I will actually find a more concurrent answer. Yeah, so I'm just going to give you my email right now. That's actually a good question. I will showcase one thing. And that one thing is, let's go back to grouped mode up at the top right-hand corner here. And if we go through and let's just name this woman right here. If I'm remembering correctly, I think her name was Lana because we deleted her momentarily. So I'm going to name her, and I'm actually going to name this one as well because they're the same woman. They're just grouped differently because she looks like she's wearing a hat in this one. And if I go into the named one here, and if I bring up the show image source thumbnails here, you can see that these images, a couple of these at least, actually contain 2 people. So in this case, we will have multiple people contained within the same image. If I was to open this image in view mode, you can see that Lana is here, and there's another box that pops up for another gentleman that we have yet to name. So in Brock's situation, he might have a bunch of people that are in the background. I just think depending on size, they're probably not going to get one of these little boxes that pops up suggesting a name. I just can't be certain of that, so I want to double check that. I think what it's going to target is what is sort of within the main focal range here, which in this case are these 2 subjects here. I'm going to go back to people mode. And what we noticed is when we named Lana here, we actually got a suggested face. And one of these is in fact Lana. So I'm going to go, yep, that's Lana. And now it is added to Lana's listing. And she, much like the rest of our subjects here, has a number that corresponds to that. So she gets added. I'll go back to the unnamed tag. And let's just go through the process of naming the rest. I will say his name is Brian, and I'll say his name is Cameron. And this one I know is a woman by the name of Trish. So I'll name these 2 as Trish. And let's go back to the named category. And we can see that there's a couple more suggestions based on these new added names. So let's have a look at them and go through. So open up Brian. These are all the images we have of Brian. Turns out we have 2 new images of Brian. So I'll approve those by clicking on the confirm all suggestions. It's going to give me a little confirm all suggestions note, and I'm just going to not ask for that again. And I'll go back to Cameron. And once again, all these 3 images are of Cameron. So I'll just approve all 3 of them. and we'll go into Trish. And it turns out that all three of these images are also Trish. So I'll approve all those. And so that's a fairly simple and quick process to naming our subjects here, rather than going through view mode manually to name each and every single person. Yeah, that covers basically everything there is to know. One of the things is if I go back to ungrouped, you can see that my ungrouped total is now reduced because we've gone through and we've actually already added a huge group section of grouped images. But you can see here, there's some ones that, ACDC is struggling with. And this one obviously is of Brian, but he's got a hat and sunglasses in this instance. And this one, he's got a bit of a smirk. So it's harder to detect, the simplicity of his face lines. We've got a couple other images here of our subject, Sarah, that gets missed due to a variety of different issues. In this case, there's something blocking the face with a hand, that sort of thing. So we'll have to go through and manually name these in this process. So we can go through and we can name them like this. I'll just name Brian here. I'll name Brian here, and we can go through and name Sarah here and Sarah here, etc., and go through and just name them manually. But using this grouped function dramatically reduces the total number of people that we have to interact with here. Mark asks, can those names be put in the IPTC tag data? Let me think here. You can move keywords. Let's go to manage mode. I'll have a look. I want to say that we have yet to add an IPTC field because we actually don't have a, let's see here, ACD. Yeah, we don't have an ACDC metadata label or field right now for face data. So there would be, you couldn't use the same keyword function to go in and add, actually, maybe let's see here, hold on. Can I manage a preset here? So go to keywords, manage presets, and then I'll look at the bottom, which is ACDC metadata. Let's click on this little arrow here, and let's see if we can insert face data. Yeah. So the answer to your question is, Mark, not yet. No, we can't add that because the only ACDC metadata that we have right now in terms of face information is the face embedded pending. So what this means is we don't have the actual face name yet that can be moved to the IPTC column. So unfortunately, you'd have to do this manually by either entering it to the keywords or some other enterable field that you can go in and you could manually add that information yet. But because ACDC metadata doesn't necessarily have the actual face name itself, we can't quickly add that to something like the keywords panel and then construct that into the keyword section of IPTC. So unfortunately, the answer to your question is no. Stan asked, if you have lots of pics, it means a large database, right? How much will that slow down ACDC on the computer for other tasks, even loading and switching to a different image? So this isn't really a new question. The answer is it doesn't really slow it down very much at all. I mean, if you're opening up a folder for the first time that has thousands and thousands of images in it, it's going to take a little while to sort of, to produce a thumbnail for you. But as soon as that thumbnail is produced, that's added to the database, and then you never have to do that again. But that process is actually not that long. Yeah. In regards to face data too, if you want to turn that process off, so you're not automatically checking for faces while you're also checking the database for things like thumbnails, you can do that. Touch base with over email, Stan, and I'll get an answer for you. I just don't remember how to do that offhand, but I know it is possible. So I'll just enter that once again. Jason asked, can you point the catalog to look at an image collection on network connection? I have an NAS where I store all my images. They aren't local to the machine that will have an image editor. Please advise. This is a common question. And again, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to it right now. Please email me. We have had multiple people work like either cloud-based, so they're accessing their photos on a cloud or that sort of thing, or they're accessing, via an external connection. Like, you could be using like an HD hard drive, that sort of thing, external hard drive. I don't think the external hard drive is so much of a problem. It's just that maybe the cloud one is a little bit more complicated. But if you can shoot me an email, Jason, that's just a bit outside of my purview, so I can find you an answer. Dave asked, can you hide the boxes while viewing, e.g. to view images with a client without the distraction of the boxes or displaying people data? Yeah, so in view mode, you can just turn that off. So by default, it's actually turned off. So what you'd want to do is you'd want to click these two buttons here, the face tool, turn this off, and then also turn off show face outlines. So by turning show face outlines, that turns off the sort of little box that appears in view mode. By default, I believe that this is turned off. You have to turn it on in order to see that. So yeah, that's just in view mode though. The boxes don't appear in any other mode. So. Okay, let's move on to media mode, which is our second tool that we're going to be talking about today. So media mode is a pretty dramatic improvement on what used to be photos mode in AC/DC. I'll show you it right now. So media mode is the second icon. It actually replaces photos mode. So those of you that are familiar with 2021 and previously will be familiar with photos mode. Opening up media mode will seem very similar. So the purpose of media mode right off the bat, okay, is to present to you all of the images that you've browsed to, aka have you added to your database in the same process that Stan was asking earlier. So these are thumbnails that have been added to our database based on our browsing habits. So it goes through and it produces a huge list of all those files for me to preview in this case. Let's do, how do I want to group these? I think I want to not group these for now. We'll start with there and we'll talk about these. So opening up media mode, you have a big list of your images here. As you can see, I've got a bunch of images, raw images up at the top, and then a huge list of JPEGs and PNGs with stock photography at the bottom here. Now, what media mode also can do is it can showcase specific folder trees. So in media mode, you'll notice that there's these two tabs that exist on the bottom left and bottom right. And these close respectively the grouping functions right here, and then also the folder tree function on the left here. So by navigating with the folder tree, so let's navigate to a specific folder. I'll go to local disk, users, admin, pictures, and then let's just open my people folder. And as I open my people folder, you can see that this folder tree, or rather these preview images, these thumbnails, are changed to reflect that of my specific folder. Note that when I click on a folder, what happens is that there's this all media icon that appears up top here. And what that does is if you click on it, it will bring you back to a listing that includes everything within your database. I'm just going to click on people here to showcase off a couple different tools that I think are really useful within this mode. So here's my whole list of images. If I right click on an image, so in case you notice that I've selected an image, and I know this because there's this little blue outline that appears around the edge of it and this little check mark. If I right click this, I can bring it into view, develop, edit mode, and I can also show it in File Explorer if I wanted to. One of the other things I can do is I can double click on my image and it actually doesn't bring in any mode. It keeps it in media mode, but it zooms in on my image. So this is a really awesome function. I can double click once again to undo that. I can click on a new image and I can go through and I can just preview those images by clicking on them. So I'm moving from thumbnail to actually full image size here. The other cool thing I can do is I can click on multiple images. So I'll just take my first 3 images here and I can actually open them in edit mode and develop mode. And what this will do is it's actually going to produce a film strip for me. So let's take these 3 images right here by holding shift, clicking on them, and I'm going to bring them into develop mode here. And what's going to happen is it will produce the image in develop mode. So I can develop from develop mode here. But you'll notice that there's a film strip open on the bottom that will enable me to actually click on the other images in my film strip here. So whenever I'm interacting in media mode here, I'm given the opportunity to bring these into develop mode as part of the film strip that I'm interacting with. If I click on more images, for example, this is actually going to increase the size of my film strip, as you'll see right now. Also, I can do the same thing in edit mode. So if I click on those same images and bring them in edit mode, it will produce a edit mode film strip that corresponds to that of my media mode. So this gives me a really quick way to open up images based on visual presentation and just edit them right away. I think that's awesome. Rick said, oh yeah, Rick, no worries. It'll be uploaded on our YouTube page for you to view the rest of it. So let's have a look at some of the questions. Answered. Jason asked, can you point the catalog to look at an image collection on a network connection? Oh, right, yes. Please email and regress that. Is there a way to display two images side by side? There is in manage mode, but not in media mode. So in media mode, it's going to open up either by double clicking on it, bringing in this view section here, or you can open it up in edit mode. But in manage mode, if you were to click on those images and you go to compare images, it'll bring it up so you can compare two images. It's just not a function of media mode yet. So let's look at some of the other functions that this does. I'll go back to my all media tab up at the top, which is going to navigate me away from that people folder. And let's have a look at some of these filters. So one of the things that this mode also does is it can filter by qualities. The first filter it can filter by is images that are tagged. I don't believe I have any tagged images right now, so we'll focus on labels and ratings. Basically, if I click on my 5 here, what it's going to do is it's going to take all of the images in my database and it's going to search for the ones that are labeled or rated as 5 in this case, and it's going to produce a listing for me of those images. And then in this case, I have a listing that contains all of those 5 rated images. I can also do the same for images that in this case have a label of red. Let's see if we have any other labels, a yellow label here. And so in this listing, this is just a label of red. Let's see if I can incorporate a number as well. So in this case, I have an image two images actually that have a rating of 5 in addition to a number of yellow. So this is a combination in this case of both searching for those different criteria. If I was to move 5 to 4, let's see, it still pertains to it. So it's searching for that in this case. So this enables me to go through my directory and search for specific qualities, in this case, labels, ratings, and tags. Oh, grading. Oh, yeah. Okay. So if I was to go over to yellow and choose equal to 5, still no 4. Yeah. Okay. I see. So the other thing that I just realized, you can actually set equal to. So in this case, these images have a rating of 5 and a label of yellow. But as soon as I go to a rating of 4, that disappears where previously it wasn't visible because I had it a rating of greater than or equal to. So that enables me to see both where previously I wasn't able to. But just as a note, something that I really want to mention is make sure you unclick, or rather click these qualities back to their sort of all settings. In this case, this gray and the label of nothing when you're complete searching for those items. And the reason why is because if you navigate to a different folder, it's still going to showcase those qualities. So when you have these set, you're going to be searching through other folders in this case. And as you search through other folders, it's going to maintain these qualities. So just make sure to set those qualities back to their default values if you want to see all of the images in those landscape folders and not just the ones that have the quality of 5 or the rating or label, that sort of thing. The last thing I want to showcase, which I think is really cool, is you can group, in this case, I've just gone to all my images, and you can group these by different values. The first thing that comes to mind is if I go to day taken, this is very similar to photos mode because there was a calendar element. And so this just replicates that calendar element. In this case, I have images that were taken on August 26th. And if I scroll down, I have some taken on August 31st. And then I have a bunch of unknown ones as they don't have any metadata because they're just stock photos. But if I go to month taken, it'll showcase that all of these were taken in the month of August. I can even go to something like file size and it'll give me a variety of different file sizes. So in this case, I have a very small image here, which is actually an SVG file, so a vector file, and it's between 0 and 299 kilobytes. Versus the very bottom of my directory here, I have the largest, which is 8 plus megabytes. So everything that's larger than 8 plus megabytes, which you might notice is a lot of my raw files in this case, and a couple of very large stock photos at the bottom. So this is like a super useful way to sort by a variety of different criteria. So yeah, you can group through that way, and you can sort via a different method here in this case. But all of these very much are similar to the experience that we had in photos mode, just with the added benefit of you being able to filter and then also open up and manage your files differently. Owen asks, I see you can click Orphan Files. Is there anything you can do from this point if you do find some? I don't think I'll have any Orphan Files if I click on this. Yeah, it's not going to change anything because I haven't really deleted any files, or I haven't disconnected any hard drives. But if you click Show Orphan Files, what this is going to do is it's going to show you a little grayed out image, and that orphan file will be a file that was previously a part of your database that you've then disconnected to. So in the case that you've taken an external hard drive that had thousands of images on it or something, and you've disconnected that, well, AC/DC is still going to recognize those images. They're just going to be orphan files. So you can show those orphan files, or by default have that turned off. And when you turn it off, those orphan files are no longer going to be visible to you, just the ones that are directly connected to your hard drive, not the ones that were previously on a hard drive. As for being able to do anything with them, I think you should. I wonder if it'll now enable you to view it in File Explorer. That's a good question. I actually haven't checked. I believe what you should be able to do is, yeah, because it'll be able to check maybe the previous location. But if you have an external, yeah, no, if you have a hard, like a external hard drive that was disconnected, then it's not going to be able to find that. So my guess is that it will be only for reference, Owen, in regards to what things were at one point disconnected. So, and obviously to clarify your whole listing, because if you're operating from a, you won't be able to cull from this mode. You'd have to do that from within manage mode. Let's take a look here. Ed asked, I had 3 to 4 weddings a week. I have a problem sorting images where the photographer uses 2 cameras. I need the images sorted by date and time. Is there a way to have camera 1 and camera 2 sorted sequentially by date and time? Right now it sorts camera 1 by date and time, and then camera 2 sorts by date and time. Well, if you're sorting or grouping, right, by date, so in this case, date taken, it's just going to produce a list of all the images, right? It's not going to produce a image, or it's not going to produce a distinction between the 2 cameras. Is your question that you need it to do a distinction between both the date and the cameras? Is my understanding correct, Ed? If that is the case, I wonder if you'll be able to image properties. Date taken, modified date, image properties, caption rating. I think that's your question, right? Is that you want to be, oh, well then, yeah, just date by group the day taken. You don't need, if your curiosity is I want to group by the camera model in addition to the day, then I would have to check with the developers in regards to this, but literally just go to group and the day taken, and then you will be able to see all those images that were taken on that day. Yeah. Okay, I want to now transition to, there'll be obviously a couple questions I won't be able to answer as I go through, but I'll try to get to them at the very end. Please be mindful to add them into the Q&A panel so I can actually address them at the end of the workshop. The chat is going to be a bit harder for me to work with at the end. Let's now talk about channel filtering. So channel filtering is a very new function, which has been added to edit mode. And this has been asked for a lot. So I'm kind of excited to talk about this. I'm going to open up, I'm just going to navigate to manage mode, and I'm going to navigate to an image. Let's see here. Let's go to image. Let's see here. Yeah, well, navigate to this image right here. I'm going to bring it into edit mode. So channel filtering enables us to filter by specific channel. So in this case, RGB. These are like, previously you could only filter by a homogenization of red, green, and blue. And now you can filter by those individual qualities. So let's show you what I mean. So if I navigate to something like a white balance, for example, I believe the modes that are going to feature channel filtering are going to be exposure, color, and maybe a couple of detail that will have this filter edit function. But if I go to white balance here, you'll notice that there's this little box here that appears up at the top, and it's going to say apply to channel. And right now we have it applied to RGB. So if I'm going to reduce the temperature and the tint on my image here, this is applied to our whole image. It is not being distinct in regards to any particular color. But what I can do is I can actually apply these adjustments, the temperature lowered to -100 and the tint increased to +100, to actually a specific color range. So if I go to red, it doesn't look like it changes anything because there's very little red in my image. If I go to blue, it changes it slightly. And if I go to green, yeah, there you go. So most of this image is represented by this green color right here, right? So if I take this temperature and lower it from this, sort of limeish green, and I lower the temperature to blue, you can see that it adds a lot of add more blue to specifically the color range of green here. If I had to increase the temperature, it actually dries out the leaves quite a bit. So I can take that individual color range and I can interact with it. I can sort of increase the tint just along one axis. If we go to a different mode, for example, let's go just to exposure to give you an example. Exposure should have the same function. So if I go to channel green, and if I was to increase the contrast, you can see the contrast is being added to that color range, or lowered in that case. If we increase the exposure or lower the exposure, versus have that function being applied to the whole image, in this case, you're having exposure applied to RGB versus just green versus blue, as you can see. So this is giving us the ability to parse between those RGB functions. A student view will also notice that we have hue, saturation, and lightness that we can also parse through as well. So I just wanted to showcase that this is a filter function that's going to come up. And it will come up more too, because we're going to talk about channel selection shortly. But before we do so, I want to talk about the selection basket, which is a new tool to AC/DC that I'm super excited about. So let's touch base in regards to that. Just need to find my image here. Yeah, we'll go into this image. Amir asked, can I find pictures of more than one person? In regards to face data, so using people mode. So people mode, what it's going to do is it's going to take a group. So say you have a group photo, and in that group photo, you have 3 people. What it's going to do is it's going to make a face for each one of those people. And if you can recall that in the example here, let's see here, one of Cameron's photos, if I give the context to some of these photos of Cameron, you'll see that there's actually 2 people in here. So what people mode does is it doesn't create a group of people. So it doesn't say like, oh, the Leonard family or something like that. No, it truly asks you to selectively add a name to every single person in that photo. So can you find a picture of more than one person? Yes, you can. In the case that I found that one of Cameron and his partner in these images, right? But I didn't find a group of them. I just using one individual image of Cameron. So hopefully that answers your question, Amir. Let's go back to that image I was going to edit. We'll talk about selection basket. Okay, so selection basket is a pretty huge improvement to edit mode. And this is a unique tool. So what I want to do today is I want to take a little bit of time to explain this because it has a lot to do with the layer panel. And a layer panel will require a little bit more in-depth explanation. So I'm going to do my best to describe this. So the selection basket itself can be found under the select and selection basket. And what it does is it brings up this little window that enables us to save as many selections as we want in our image. It actually also saves masks as well, which I'm going to highlight during this conversation. But so saving a selection is super useful because some selections can take a while to produce, as you well know. I mean, sometimes if I'm making a selection of a subject, it's going to take upwards of maybe 5 or 10 minutes to even make that selection hyper accurately with something like the brush selection tool or the polygonal selection tool. So being able to save that selection during the process of editing is a huge benefit to us. So let's talk about the selection basket. I have a question for you first, though. I'm going to make a selection of the sky in my image. And I just want to ask to just get a general understanding, just fire off in chat, whether or not you prefer the selection highlighted like we do here with the overlay of red, or if you prefer the marching ant selection. I just want to get an understanding of which one of these methods you prefer in order to understand this function. So do you prefer marching ants or do you prefer the overlay? Okay, 3 already for overlay. Awesome. I massively prefer the overlay. I just wanted to give people the opportunity to answer. Okay, so it's pretty much universal. Okay, so let's talk about this using the overlay. I think the overlay will be a bit easier to understand as well. Okay, so here's what I want to do first. I'm going to tell you what I want to do before I start doing it. What I want to do is I want to make a selection of the sky in my image. Okay. And what I'm intending to do is eventually put a new image underneath my image in order to create a new sky in my image. So I want a new sky for my image. And we're going to do that using the selection basket. So all I've done here is I've used in this case, the magic wand tool, and I'm going to click anywhere on the sky. And in this case, because the sky is pretty much universal in terms of its appearance, it's going to do a fairly good job of making that selection. This is great. So I don't need to do a bunch of tweaks to this or whatever. I'm just going to go ahead and add this to my selection basket. So in order to add something to your selection basket, there's these 2 icons that you guys can see right down here. The first one is add the current selection to the basket. When I click on this, it's going to take an active selection, in this case that we know that we have because there's this overlay here, and it's going to add that selection to the selection basket. So we can compare these 2 selections, as you can see, to the selection basket. So that gets added. There's a little icon to the left of it that adds a mask to the basket, which we're going to be talking about momentarily. I'll just ask you to not worry about this icon, and we'll talk about some of the other ones. As soon as we have a selection, we can do some things to that selection. And those things that we can do are located right here. The first thing we can do is we can duplicate the selection itself. So if I click on this little duplicate button, you can see that a second selection of the same selection in this case pops up. The other thing I can do is I can delete a selection if I don't want it anymore. And the other thing I can do is I can use the select selection as the current selection button, which might seem a little bit silly, but when we have a deselected selection, in this case, we have no selection active at all, we can click on this little button right here to set that as the active selection. And again, when we're making really complicated selections that take multiple minutes to do, being able to go in and quickly reselect that selection is a huge deal. So you can use that to reselect at any point. The last thing we can do is we can take our selection, this selection right here, and what I can do is I can transfer it to a mask, okay? So I can move this selection to our actual layer panel. So we're gonna do this. I'm gonna click this little button right here, and it's going to take this selection and apply it as a mask right here. And what I'm gonna ask you to do, okay, is I'm gonna just put the selection basket over here, And I'm going to ask you to now transfer all of your attention over to this side, which is the layer panel here. And let's actually have a look at this mask. So I'm going to explain this for those that do not use masks in AC/DC. This is an important concept to understand because masks are the hardest thing that you can, not the hardest, they're the most complicated element within AC/DC. So I have my image here, and next to my image is there's this little box that contains this mask. And this mask has information in it. This little thumbnail here contains two different colors. In this case, I have a white color, which represents our sky, as we can see in our image here. And we have a black color, which represents the base of our image and the tree in the foreground here. So this information is really useful because in the case of masks, white means that that part of my image is turned on and is visible to me, which we can reference because the sky is in fact still blue. And the black portion of our mask is turned off. And we can see that because we get this transparency that exists beneath at the very bottom of my image here. So in regards to masks, white is turned on, aka visible, and black is turned off, aka invisible. What this doesn't mean, though, is that those images have been erased. Okay, so those images are merely hidden from view. If I was to do something like disable or remove this mask, then we can see that my remainder of my image pops up again. So I want to be very clear that masks are non-destructive. They're not changing the information that's presented beneath this or changing the base image. We're just interacting with a temporary sort of adjustment to our image. Okay. So I have my landscape image here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to invert this this mask. When I invert a mask, it's going to take those whites and blacks and it's going to flip them so that we elements that are turned on and the elements that are turned off are inverted. So I'm going to click on my mask and I'm going to click on the invert button, which is located underneath the mask properties. And we will be able to see that now the opposite is true. And let's reference our mask once again to reference this. So the sky is turned off, hence the checkered transparency that we see there. And the white is turned on, hence us being able to see the grass and the tree. So this is good. Why I'm doing this is because I'm going to take this mask that we have now, which is no longer a selection. So keeping in mind, a selection is similar to what we did with the magic wand. A selection is going to appear and it's going to, in this case, show up with this, this red overlay. We're no longer interacting with that. We're interacting with a new concept. We're interacting with this mask. So I'm going to click on this mask here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the mask to add the currently selected layer mask to the basket. And when I do this, what's going to happen is it's going to add a layer mask to my basket that is very, very similar to that of my first selection, but note that it is now inverted. This is really cool. So basically interacting with both of these enables me to place new layers and then use these masks on layers. Let's do something new. Let's add a new layer to my layer panel. So I'm going to just hide this selection basket for a moment here. And let's navigate to an image that has a sky. Let's just add this one right here. I'm going to take this image and I'm going to drag and drop it onto my layer panel. So my image is added. Okay. I'm just going to place this image and commit it using this top button up at the left-hand corner here. And what this does is it adds this layer at the very top of my layer panel. Now, what I can do is I can drag and drop this layer to put it beneath my landscape layer here. And because this mask is applied and the sky in our landscape 48 layer is hidden from view, that's going to show us this landscape layer that exists beneath it. I'm going to move this slightly because it's driving me nuts. I don't know. We can go with a different sky image, but that's fine for this presentation. But the other thing we can do is we can take this landscape layer right here. And what I can actually do is I can apply this selection to this landscape. So what do I want to hide? Well, I want to show the sky. I want to show the ground rather from my previous layer, and I want to show the sky in my new layer. So I would take this second selection, or the first selection that we made here, and I'm going to apply this as a mask on my landscape layer. And so when I do that, let's just have a look at, once again, our selections. You can see that this selection removes the grass and the tree and keeps the sky. And then this bottom layer, which contains the tree and the grass, this layer is kept, and then the sky is removed. So I can take these two things while using the selection basket to sort of combine images, make really cool use of masks, and overall just save myself an enormous amount of time while interacting with AC/DC because these selections or masks were saved along the way. Now, I would like to take a moment to just answer any questions in regards to this tool, because this is a bit more complicated than other tools. So fire off if you have anything in regards to the selection basket. No questions is good too, but I just want to touch base in regards to it. So Amir asked in regards to another one, in regards to people mode. My question was if I could find 2 pictures of 2 people together. And I answered that, Amir. You can find 2 pictures together using the context in people mode by using that little grouped ungroup function. Tom asked, can you rename the selections in the basket? Let's find out. If I right click on it, I should be able to rename it. So I could go grass and I could go sky. Yeah. What else can we do? Set as selection. We can basically do these same functions just by right clicking as well. Does the selection get saved with the image? I believe when we open up the selection basket, right, they're temporary for when we're interacting with this image. So I don't believe these are saved unless we maybe save this as an AC/DC file. So this is a great question. Actually, I don't know the answer to it. My gut reaction is that they probably are basically saved for interaction with the like it's a temporary. But let's try saving this as an AC/DC file and see what happens. So I'm just going to call this landscape 048 AC/DC file format, which and let's see if those elements are saved. Those selection baskets are saved permanently. Let's see. Okay, doesn't look like it. I think that may be treated as a singular instance. Yeah, that's right. So basically I can recreate these selections because I have masks in this case, saved with an AC/DC image. But the selection basket is treated as a single instance whenever you open up the file. You can, however, save selections themselves, but I would recommend if you're making, complicated selections, to make sure that you save as an AC/DC file, because that way you keep the layers. So here's a way that you could basically reconstruct your selection basket, but no, it doesn't look like you can save it. So we could take this mask, for example, go to selection basket and bring that up as a mask. And then what I could do is I could select this mask, and then I could just go to save selection and save, say, selection 1. And then that way I can save that selection, that I can bring it up in the future. And that selection, I believe, is saved when we navigate away from this file. So let's bring that up again. And I believe that selection should be, loaded. So The selection basket itself is temporary, but you can save selections to your file that can then be moved into the selection basket. Also masks. Okay, let's touch base in regards to channel selection, because channel selection is also something that relates to what we're talking about here. So we just talked about the selection basket. Now let's talk about channel selection. So channel filtering and channel selection are very similar. In this image, I have a bunch of very yellow trees, and we're going to do our best to select that channel. Let's show you how to do that. I'm going to navigate to select and channel selection that's underneath luminance and color range here. And it's going to bring up this little window here. And this window enables me to do a variety of different interactions. So we can take a look at these various channels, RGB channels, CMYK channels, lab channels, and HSL channels, which are all basically variations of determining like light in our image. And for the purpose of our image here, we want to target yellow. So let's go to cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And if I click on yellow, you can see that my image here has a little mask preview. And we can interact with this mask preview however we like. Basically, I can introduce some curves into this and change it. But this selection, or this channel, I can do a variety of different things with. I can save it directly to my selection basket, as we were interacting with earlier. I can set it as an active mask, or I can set it as a selection. I can also invert it, which we'll touch base in a moment. But right now, I'm just going to take this channel that we have, this yellow channel, and I'm going to save it as a selection. And so you can see that my selection is indicated by my red overlay. And then if I'm to take this red overlay and I go to vibrance, for example, I can see that this mask here corresponds to that channel selection I made earlier. So if I do something like change the hue to maybe like a reddish orange, increase the saturation, well, now that's being applied to just the trees in my image, as you can see here. So all I did here was go to channel and then select yellow, add it as a selection, and then apply a adjustment layer. And in this case, I've applied adjustment layer of a saturation and a change of hue. And so what that does is it now adjusts it. What we can also do, let's just delete this vibrance adjustment. I can take my layer once again, go to channel selection, select yellow. And in this case, I'll select the inversion of that. And let's set it as a mask this time. When I set it as a mask, you can see that all of the yellow in my image, the inversion of yellow in this case, which is blue, greens, everything else, is presented to us. But the yellows themselves are actually made transparent. And we can reference that using the layer mask again. You can see that all of the black trees in my image are transparent. And interestingly, what I can do is I can actually invert it as well. So I can invert it so that everything else in my image is made transparent, and my trees are the ones that are visible to me. This is also something I can do within the channel selection. I can select yellow, set as a mask, and as you can see, it's very similar to me interacting with that previous channel, that inverted channel. So this is cool. If I was to take my channel here and invert it once again, I could put something like a layer, let's say I could put, I'll just fill this layer with orange. So I could take my layer above and the layer beneath it and just fill a blank layer, in this case with orange. So all I did here was I went down, clicked on add a blank layer, moved it beneath my layer, and then filled it with the fill tool and the color orange. And that fills all of the yellow channel in my image, or in this case, all what the yellow, everything but the yellow channel in my image, and that fills it with the color orange. So channel filtering, channel selection rather, enables me to isolate specific channels and then add them as either selection masks or moving them directly into my basket. And the cool thing about this is, like I said, you can actually invert it within the panel itself. So you can interact with the inverse of what you're actually selecting using channel selection. So one of the things to touch base on in regards to a new feature in Ultimate 2022, I'm just going to discard this, is the luminance color range. So how many of you are familiar with pixel targeting in 2021 and previously? I'm just curious in regards to that. Hi, Wayne, no problem. We'll be uploading this to YouTube later today. Okay, Joel's not familiar with pixel targeting. That's good. Luminance and color range is a new tool that has been added to ACDC Photo Studio Ultimate 2022 that replaces pixel targeting, but adds a greater degree of incremental control. So I'm going to open up this landscape image here, bring it into edit mode, and let's talk about luminance and color range. So in my image here, I have an image that has a pretty significant luminance difference between the sky, I guess the middle area of our image here, and like the foreground, which are these trees here. And this is really useful. So I'm going to touch base in regards to luminance and color range. To get to luminance and color range, you go to select, up at the select menu here, and you bring it up right here. It's this one right here. And what this enables you to do is it enables you to make a distinction between basically the luminance in your image, aka the brightness, and the color, aka the hue. So if I will just first showcase color range just really quickly. What this enables me to do is if I was to color the range, if I was to move this wheel into the green area of our image, you'll notice that that red selection overlay is introduced. And I can maybe just further bring this around. And what this is showcasing to us is that if we were to click OK, then this part of our image would be selected, okay? So we can move this wheel to select different colors in our image, but because our image is pretty monochromatic, it just exists between the green and yellow spectrum, we can sort of alternate between these two and select different values. I'm not going to interact with color range though. What I'm going to interact with is actually luminance. So luminance is going to give me the ability to basically select darker or lighter parts of my image. And as you can see, the luminance slider goes from very, very black at the far left here, which is these parts of our image, to very, very light at the very other end part of our image. So if I was to select these colors, it would just be these brights in my image. But if I take these sliders and sort of move them around, I can really focus in on parts of my image quite well. So if I want my luminance to target my image, but I don't want to target any of this sort of smoky, foggy area in the background, I can sort of pull this off. And as you can see, I'm not targeting the lighter parts of my image here. In addition to the skies, I don't want to target any of that. So if I do this, if I work with these little sliders here, I can play around to sort of find a part of my image that works best for the target that the selection that I want to make. And then when I'm satisfied with this, I would just click OK. And then as you can see, that is now an active overlay selection that I'm working with. So if I do something like interact with curves now, so what I can do is I'm just selecting that part of my image. I'm just making curves adjustments to that. So if I wanted to be really dramatic, I could adjust those parts of my image, which I think looks so much better if we add a little bit of, if we pull our blacks further into the shadows section, if we pull our shadows further towards black, then we have a lot more granular control. Oops, didn't want to do that. A lot more contrast and granular control in the center of the image, where previously it was kind of smoky. So this gives you the ability to interact with all different parts of tonal parts of your image using the luminance and color range function. Now, so this is what has replaced pixel targeting. And interestingly, this luminance and color range function has also been added to the develop mode brush tool. which is a huge addition because pixel targeting or luminance and color range was not something you could previously do in develop mode. So I'm going to showcase that because this is an amazing, amazing change to AC/DC. I'm just going to take this landscape image right here and I'm going to bring it into develop mode. And let's have a look at our image. If I look at my image here, this is lovely, really cool image. One of the things I don't like about this is how much this green of the forest reflects onto the water here. And it's on both sides of our image. Now we can change this. We can actually like interact with this element by using the brush tool in combination with pixel targeting. And what this is going to do is it's going to enable me to select exactly this color in this area and adjust that. So let's showcase what I mean. So I'm interacting with color. So I'd be in the Tune tab and I will click on the brush tool. And what I want to do here is I just want to make a brush selection. So in order to use the pixel targeting aspect, we first need to make a selection. So I'm just going to make a selection of that green area in my image that I don't like right here and right here. So I'm going to take that. And with that active brush selection, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the pixel targeting tab. And we're very familiar with this. We just looked at this in regards to luminance. The difference is we're going to be interacting with color this time. So we use the color range tab instead of the luminance range tab. So I'm going to take this color and let's turn on the show mask preview. And what this is going to do is it's going to show us what we're actually selecting. Turn off the brush strokes. And I'm going to move this slightly out of the way so we can see what we're interacting with. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that this selects all of that without selecting too much of the blue. So I'm going to pull this little yellow slider, this little pan slider right here, over there until all of the green in our image that we selected with the brush is now doubly selected using color range. And so you can see that one of the cool things about this is that we're completely avoiding the blue part that we previously selected with the brush. So if I just turn off this, I didn't really want to select this portion of my image. I just wanted to touch on the green elements here, right there. And the same is true for this side right here. So we've done a really, really incredible job of selecting obviously that portion of our image using the brush tool, but then refining exactly the greens that we're selecting and wanting to adjust using the color range, luminance range adjustment. So now with that complete, with our green selected and our brush selection active, let's go to the color EQ tab and we'll go to hue. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull the green towards blue, maybe pull the cyan towards blue as well. We'll see. So I'm just going to pull this. And as you can see, it's amazing. It's such an incredible difference. Even just pulling it there, like it totally blends in. And I may just pull that. Actually, I don't even need to interact with cyan. It's just green I need to interact with. But just by doing that, look at this. Look at the difference between this. Like perfectly selected. And it covers the entire green area without interacting with this blue at all. And like, I mean, I know it's not true to the original photo, but that is such a nice adjustment. It's so, so nice. Like, yeah, so just being able to use something like pixel targeting and color range here is really giving us so much control in areas of our image where there is like a lot of colors that are very similar. Being able to use the brush tool in conjunction with the color range or the luminance range for other images is giving us so much more developmental control over our images. So yeah, this is huge. I'm really impressed with this addition. Being able to go in and just tweak these values is such a benefit to this product. So another addition to develop mode is the pixel targeting brush. So I'll just go into another image here and I'll bring it into develop mode. So previously we touched base in regards to the tune brush, but I'm actually going to go to the detail tab here, which is the second tab here. And I'm going to click on the brush tool. And this wasn't in the previous version of the product, but now the tune brush, or sorry, the detail brush has a luminance noise reduction slider added. So what we can do is we can slide this over our image and use the luminance and the noise reduction sliders to find a happy middle ground between this like super granular noise that we see here and something that looks a little bit more natural, something that looks a little bit slightly more faded. And if I move this guy, can everyone see the difference between the brush that I've sort of brushed on here and then the granular noise that you're seeing in the remainder of the image? I just want to double check to see make sure everyone can see that. Yeah, so this feature was highly requested by our users. They wanted a develop noise reduction brush, and here it is, it's added. So you can go through and you can just quickly brush on areas of your image that you want to see that luminance adjustment. And I'll just pull that all the way around. And it's maybe harder to see without it zooming out, but I can also just increase the size of this brush and then apply that to the remainder of the sky in my image. And that's gonna address that issue. Here, let's move this guy right down here. So you can see where the drop off of that luminance noise reduction adjustment is, right near the tree line here, because you can see where that adjustment stops. So you can go through and you can sort of work with the brush, and keep in mind that you can also use smart brushing. So if I was to reduce that, remove it right there, turn on smart brushing. So I could be very technical about where I wanted that to affect the tree line there. Thank you, Ed. Take care. I'll put it up on YouTube tonight. So yeah, so this has been a huge suggestion from a lot of our users, and I'm just glad that people are finally able to use this noise reduction. Previously, noise reduction was only something you could apply to the whole image. You can never be selective about. So just be mindful that this is new to 2022. Also new to 2022 is the squareness slider. So if I go to the radial gradient, radial gradient is something that you can now make square. So I can just use this squareness slider right here. I'll go to tune actually. Let's do it. Let's just go drop the exposure. That's easier to see. So I've just clicked on my radial gradient here, and I can just increase my squareness slider to adjust the gradient itself. So now it's a square gradient versus a round gradient, and I can completely remove the feathering if I want to showcase that. So if you want to make adjustments to square parts of your image, this might be super useful for Windows. I don't know how often it would come up, but any square space that you want to adjust in your image, you can now do so with the squareness slider in the radial gradient. Yeah. Okay, one of the last things I want to touch base in regards is HDR and focus stacking. So how many of you have used, pardon me, focus stacking within AC/DC previously, or HDR? Doesn't matter, either of these. Mark says he has not yet had a chance, neither. Okay, tried it once, yeah. So that's okay. So not many people are familiar with this, which is okay. So I'll give you the lowdown. Basically, some of our more like intermediate users or people that have tried focus stacking on AC/DC were quite critical of it, and we definitely agreed with their critiques, and we fixed it. So focus stacking used to be quite well. Here, I'll just show you. I'm going to compare these two images, and I'll tell you which one is in the new one and which one is in the old one. So focus stacking is essentially when you take a group of images and you take the part that is in focus in this group of image in every single image, and you combine those elements that are in focus into one image. And unfortunately, this was really bad in previous editions of ACDC. This was a failed focus stacking run from 2021. And on the right side is our 2022 improved focus stacking function. So focus stacking obviously is not going to work very well when there is elements of your photo that are in motion. So you're going to get these little artifacts, that sort of thing that pops up. And even in this image, there's a couple of artifacts that appear in the image. But overall, focus stacking is so dramatically improved. It is absolutely night and day in the new software. And the same is the case for HDR. So I just wanted to showcase like how dramatically improved these functions are, especially if you've used focus stacking in the previous editions. Now, focus stacking, I'll show you how to do it. It's quite simple. It's sort of an automated process. But one thing I would note is that if you're making a focus stack with raw images, which is totally fine, that gives you the most critical detail in your images. Just be mindful that it's going to take slightly longer than if you were to batch convert your images to, say, TIFF files or JPEG files, or something that would be a lower resolution file type. So I'm just going to navigate to a folder that I created that contains a bunch of JPEGs. And these JPEGs are going to be faster for me to make a focus stack of. Basically, to make an accurate focus stack, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to select every third or fourth image. You don't need to include every single image in a focus stack. Actually, maybe we will, though, just to showcase it off. Oops. I'm just going to click these. Oops. Wrong selection. There we go. So I'll take all of these images. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine them together to make a focus stacked image. So it's going to take all the elements that are in focus and combine them. So, but like I said, you don't need to include every single image, but I would recommend maybe including every second or every third. I'll go to process and I'm going to go to focus stack. And then what it's going to do is it'll load these images, and let's see how we do in terms of our focus stack. I might want to remove a couple of these images to get a better output, but let's see how we do. And we're just going to blend these images. And then it'll produce an output file, or prompt me to produce an output file. Okay, let's save it in here. Let's do new, and then what's the date today? It's the 7th. Okay, let's try this. See how it came out. So we'll view it. Yeah, it's very similar to the one we did previously in terms of, I think we might not have needed to include these last two images, but it looks pretty good. So if we're looking at our image here, what you'll notice is that when we focus stack an image, because it's trying to correct the angle of the image and it's trying to do its best to sort of, what's the word for it? Make sure that they're all in line. What's going to happen is that because there's some natural movement in our image between our hand and even on something as simple as a tripod, what we're going to need to do is we'll probably have to manually go in and just crop our image, because we are going to get this little line that appears on the edge of our image. And this is produced, like I said, when it's trying to align all of those images together. But in terms of the actual content of our image, I mean, it's absolutely night and day from our original that we had in 2021 and previously. Now, as for HDR, HDR is very, very similar. So I have a variety of different raw images here. And once again, I've turned them into JPEGs because it's a bit of a faster operation. And let's just take, what do we want to do? Yeah, let's just take all of them and see how it does. Actually, maybe not the super bright one. We'll take all of these images and we're going to run a high dynamic range. And when we click on high dynamic range, it'll give us a thumbnail that we can interact with. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, I'm going to just move it to the natural one. I'm not a big fan of some of these previews. So we have black and white, for example, detailed, dramatic. and then just natural. I think natural is the best looking one. The others are a little bit more of they have a serious look to them. Let's just say that. I'll click OK, and it'll do through the same process. It'll align those images and it'll blend them together. And again, taking the elements that are sort of the best part of our elements, the most part of our elements that are in focus, and providing us with sort of a better version of that with the most dynamic range. And when we look at our output file, it's going to prompt us to name this file momentarily. There we go. HDR new 7th. Click save. And we will be able to view the final file, which contains all of the sort of best elements from all of our images here. So again, once another example of something that is dramatically different and dramatically, improved from our previous versions. So please play around with our new HDR focus stacking. Like I said, they've been dramatically improved, and they're sort of they're a really cool tool that if you've never used before, they're very fun to play with. So. Okay, so that sort of covers everything that I wanted to cover today. Let's have a look at some of these questions I wasn't able to get to. Wayne asked, are there improved ways to fix exposure on a backlight photo? I have trouble choosing, say, the person to light up. Are there improved ways to fix exposure on a backlight photo? Well, that doesn't, there's nothing, it's in the new product that that sort of pertains to that exact question. Although that being said, I mean, Wayne, have you played around with Light EQ? That's like the patent move for dealing with that exact issue. Definitely Light EQ in conjunction with maybe using something like the brush tool in develop mode or in edit mode using just layers and masks to deal with that. But no, nothing in 2022 if you're asking about a new feature. Setting as a mask had transparency, but selection basket had overlay. Okay, maybe I didn't cover that quite well enough. So if I'm in an image, Deb, okay, and we made a selection, right? Using, let's say we'll just make a channel selection, okay? So here's my sky image and I want to channel, yeah, let's do a channel of red, right? So I have these three options here. I can save to my selection basket if I wanted, which adds it right there. But what I can also do is I can go to the channel selection and I can save it as a mask. So setting as a mask had transparency. And the reason why is because when you set it as a mask, it takes your active layer, right? And it isolates the channel that you're selecting, okay? In this case, the red. And it's going to turn everything else into a transparency. So a selection doesn't do this because a selection is pending information. So let's just undo this and go to channel selection. In this case, set as a selection. So we're waiting for information on what to do with this red selection, okay? So that's what the active selection is for. Now, if I click the mask here, okay, so if I click mask, it's going to do the exact same thing. It just has an active selection now. So when I make a channel selection and I set it as a mask, it's going to replicate whatever I'm isolating, in this case, this red color, and that's going to be the element that it turns on, Deb, versus the black in our element, which is everything else, all the channels that we're not selecting, and turn those off. So does that make sense, Deb? When I set it as a mask, it's going to convert that information to a mask. So what am I turning on? What am I turning off? When I set as a selection, it's just going to have an active selection and it's waiting for me to provide it new information. It's waiting for me to either turn it into a mask, or it's waiting for me to, for example, let's go back. So we have an active selection. It's waiting for me to do something as simple as add a vibrance adjustment and change the hue, or you know what I mean? So when I have an active selection, it's operating, it's just waiting for me to input a new instruction. But setting as a mask is going to mask that image. So it's going to mask in correspondence with what you're trying to make a selection of. You're welcome, Christoph. Lars said, thanks, Adam. Keen on getting into 22 in Germany and subscription. Yeah, well, it should be out in a couple weeks for German, Lars, and you're welcome. Thank you, Nola. I'm glad that was helpful to you. Owen, thanks, Adam, and also for the assistance to my database. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you, Owen. Owen had asked me a question over email, so. Oh, I should probably provide it again before I forget. Again, please email me if you have any questions at all. Just if you got concerns in regards, I want to see this in the product. Can you please add this feature to, I don't know what to do because I'm having issues with this one thing, or maybe is this a bug or something like that, Adam? Some sort of error in the software, or just a curiosity on how to do something in the software. I answer all of those. You're welcome, Brock. Deb, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that answered your question. Okay, Amir, I'm going to take another chance at your question here. You asked, can you clean the line connecting the two pictures? Can you please provide me some more information? I am misunderstanding your question, obviously, because you've asked it twice. What do you mean by clean the line connecting the two pictures? Anonymous asked, previously when upgrading to the latest version, all preferences and settings have to be redone in the new installation. Preferences and settings. Does 2020 allow you to migrate your current version settings and prefs? That's a good question. What do you mean by settings and preferences? I know that when it comes to like creating keywords and categories, those things are going to have to be converted to the Note program. But do you just mean like the location of like your workspaces and things like that? Like, what do you mean, Anonymous? Thank you, Nikolay. Thank you, Steve. Okay, Amir said, in the combination of two photos, it created a line between the two photos. Oh, do you mean like when I was comparing the two images? So if I compare these two images, there's this line between the center of the two. Is that what you're referring to, Amir? Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, I mean, it was a pretty, I sort of rushed that, but basically when I have this image here, right? And we're making a selection of the sky, the better our selection is, the better that the lack of line that there will be. So in this image, I have my sky selection here, and let's select an inversion of it, and let's refine the selection. And so you're seeing this line right here. That's what you're referring to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift the edge, and I'm going to add a slight bit of feathering. Let's see here. Let's try this. So you make that selection, and maybe I'll add a sky now. So we'll just add this sky here. Oops, let's mask this first. Cancel, mask. I'd need to play around with this. I'm just going to paint this back. I mean, this is what I sort of meant when I was talking about earlier in regards to selections taking some time. Oops. Because I just made a single selection with the magic wand tool. But if I'm to actually spend some time with these things, let's put another layer on here. Yeah, put it underneath. That is marginally better. There's not that white line that appears there, but I still need to go in and I need to, I need to touch up certain areas because it's kind of a little bit chunky. Oops. There we go. And I'd have to come over here. Need to smooth it out. So these are sort of selections in general that you'd want to spend more time with. Let's see if I can get the remainder of this to just appear like that. Not bad. The only thing I would say is I want a bit of feathering to sort of not have it appear so so sharp. But that's sort of what I mean, Amir, when I say, like, you know, we could blend these things better for sure. But when it comes to these sort of processes, they just take longer, right? Because when I'm just using the magic wand tool, like, it's going to do an okay job, but it's not going to do an amazing job of blending these things. So in terms of, you'd want to work with these things, work with the brush tool. Maybe when it comes to like things that are very angular, I would actually prefer to use the polygonal selection tool over the magic wand tool almost all the time. Does this sort of answer your question? Because like, this is going to take a little bit longer to do if we want to do it properly, if we really want to take some time and make an accurate selection. Not yet. There've been talks about adding sort of automatic selections of subjects. So when it comes to like, you know, like a person in your image, so it can make an automated selection. But no, there's no automated function other than the magic wand tool. There's also, I mean, we did do automatic channel selections earlier when it comes to specific color ranges. So keep that in mind. But there's no automatic selection for things like, you know, objects and stuff like that in your image yet. You're welcome. Sorry, I didn't answer your question earlier. That makes more sense now that I've had some time to actually get into it. Okay, Mark. Oh, that's what you meant in your earlier question too. Okay, great. I'm glad that we got two birds with one stone there. Rock asks, he wants to be able to do that and between two names, so he gets both the selection and picture of both users in it. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. Well, we got there. Anonymous asks, all the settings under tools options. Okay, so this is in regards to these sections. Oh, I see. So like, you've gone in and you've adjusted a variety of these different functions. Can you please shoot me an email, Anonymous? Again, it's aprice@acdsystems.com. I can find out for you whether or not these settings within the options tabs can be saved. I'm not sure if they can when you go to start the new project, start the new product or not, but I can find out. So if you just email me, I'll get an answer to it, but I'm sorry, I can't. And as for the promo code, not yet. So we just, obviously a lot of people just purchased the product. So to provide a promo code this early would be to, you know, that's not fair to those people that just bought it. So. Okay, that sort of covers everything I wanted to cover today. Obviously, please email me if you have any other questions or curiosities or anything like that. But that's it. That runs us exactly 1 hour and 30 minutes for this workshop. Like I said, I'll have this up on YouTube. Yeah, I'll have it up on YouTube before the end of the day. I just need to edit the video. So thanks everyone for participating. Like I said, email me with any questions, comments, concerns, questions, you know, suggestions for the product, that sort of thing, and I'll be happy to get an answer for you. My email is aprice@acdsystems.com, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I will talk to you probably in 2 weeks when we have another next workshop. So, thank you, everybody. I'm going to mute my mic now.